Hi, everyone. Welcome to Pivotal Practices. This is episode 14, and we were just looking back to see how long it had been, and we haven't recorded since September. And I just couldn't help but laugh because sometimes life is so busy that things get postponed. But we are back, and we will still be continuing to do podcasts and have guests on. So I look forward to even chatting today about really this subject that sometimes can be hard for people to want to hear, but it's super important. And it also can liberate you in the way of helping you understand how to stay healthy. So, it's just me today, but I'm going to just dive right in. So, I want to talk about what are some of the ways that disease happens in our body? How does disease occur? How does our body stay healthy? What is our role in all of that and our own responsibility to that? So, one of the things that I wanted to start with are what are some of the things that cause disease in the body? So, if you remember in the first podcast, I talked about this book called The Secret of Your Cells. That book, a doctor actually studies cells in the body and all of the different characteristics of how consciousness actually can be proven to affect your cellular structure, the integrity of your immune system, and whether or not your cells will stay healthy or even commit what's called cell suicide when they feel like they just need to terminate. So, one of the things that's important to understand is to stay healthy, we need to be able to watch our attitudes. This doesn't mean that I can't ever get frustrated. It doesn't mean that I can't have a bad moment or a reaction, but it means how far do I take it? How long do I ruminate over it? How long am I allowing it to affect me? And as important as it is to process things, because that's also part of staying healthy, if we continue to overshare, so let's say it this way, I can share when I first experience something with my spouse. That's me still digesting it, is actually like trying to hear somebody else's reaction. And I might be in shock depending on what has occurred. So talking is also important, or to a counselor, right? And maybe you even need to talk about it at a different date to another person. But if we start sharing that stressor with everybody we see all day long, that's all we're going to think about, that's all we're going to talk about, it is going to actually allow my body to take on that stress and put my nervous system into sympathetic mode. Okay. And if you remember, sympathetic mode in the nervous system is our fight or flight. That is not our healing state for the body. That's not an equilibrium state. That's when cortisol starts washing over our brain too much and our digestive system slows down because it thinks we need to run or take off. It's when we exhaust a lot of energy, but our body can't actually take in the minerals and nutrients at the same capacity. So, with it being said, I want to just make that mental note of staying healthy also means, what is my attitude? Do I still face things in life in a reasonable way, or do I allow myself to become a victim? Becoming a victim can really hurt the body over the course of time. So that's one way that sometimes disease can happen. The other way is too much stress. So there's been people with MS over the years that I've helped put into remission, and also autoimmune diseases, just multiple different things through my experiences and my holistic body work, where I'm also co-laboring with my client. My client might come with some of these diseases, but that also means that something's been out of balance. The only way a disease occurs, outside of it being maybe hereditary or from birth, right? Something that's completely different. But if we've been a healthy person and all of a sudden eventually disease takes on, and it has nothing to do with aging, right? Normal aging process, this means something is off. So sometimes we can't help that there are these prolonged seasons in life where stress is continuing, and it just seems like you're getting bogged down with, like, maybe a parent's death, and then maybe a friend passes, and then maybe all of a sudden you lose your job or you get laid off, right? Like, there are these seasons that are extra stressful. But we have to, at some point in time, get that off season where things calm down, where we choose to also limit the excess stress, where we can control it, and allow ourselves to come back to this healing state. And if we've had a really long, prolonged season of stress, we need to face that after it's finished, that we will need a season of healing, a season of pulling back from stressful situations or people. When we're talking about stress being at like this level, a lot of my people that have come to me, a good amount of them usually are in a very stressful, abusive, if they've gotten a disease, abusive, emotionally abusive, physically, whatever it might be, marriage. And they've been in it for such a long time that the body is so worn down from the stress that a disease ends up taking place. Some of these people have extremely high positionings in jobs and work, and they might make a lot of money, but the stress is so high and there's never enough downtime that their body does not know how to come back to the healing, rest, and digest state. And this is still in our control. In the life that we have to walk out in the human body, right? With this human body and the rules that it has, the way that it was created to be made, there are things we cannot get away from. We can't just say, well, I don't really agree with that, when that's the blueprint of how the body stays healthy, and act as if we can go against the rules that the body has structures that need to be fed certain vitamins and minerals, and that it needs to have downtime to actually heal and to stay in that equilibrium state. Whether we want to accept that or not, that's just the truth. That's the reality of the body. So for us to stay healthy, at times when things have gotten off, we actually have to sit back and say, what's really been out of balance? Is something causing this? Is my job too stressful? Am I in a really abusive relationship? Am I surrounded by even maybe an abusive family or a parent, right? That I just keep taking on and acting like I'm obligated to that relationship. There are so many things we have to ask ourselves when disease has set in. And then accordingly, actually start getting the tools we need to manage stress, getting maybe the body work or counseling and other modalities that help us heal also incorporated so that we can find that place back to equilibrium. Sometimes we even have to let go of some relationships or start learning even how to set boundaries, just as we recorded that podcast on boundaries and what it means to, like, with love, know your limitations. And then there's also this other avenue of how disease can set in, and that is that I just say yes to everything all the time. I don't have any outside barrier or limits, and I do whatever anybody around me needs me to do. I'm an overgiver. I'm overly giving to the point that I feel depleted or resentful or out of excess. And I've heard some people say, well, I'm just a worrier. That's just who I am. And it's like, well, if that's what you want to say, then you're never going to be able to not become a non-worrier. And eventually, an example of how that can hurt the body is you're going to disrupt the stomach meridian. You're going to disrupt the adrenals and the kidneys. You're going to disrupt the spleen meridian, which is responsible as the main meridian for dispersing chi in the body. And what's going to start to happen is the body's going to be running on like fumes eventually, because you are in this complete fight or flight place because you're constantly making up scenarios of things that aren't going on, or possibly over mixing yourself and other people's problems as if you're supposed to fix them and be responsible. And that's not good for anybody's growth, right? People have to kind of solve their own problems, learn how to also handle their own lives, have their own coping skills, and get their own needs met. That's their responsibility, not anybody else's. And so these are just ways where the body starts getting depleted on like a large scale over time. And it won't be as if the disease kind of happened over the course of time. Most of the time what happens is it's just like this switch finally goes off. It's like the body keeps trying to adjust to what you're handing it or what it's feeling. And then all of a sudden this switch just turns on and your body stops recognizing its own cells and starts attacking its own body because you have fed this consciousness of nothing is safe for a long time. Nothing is relaxing. I'm always going to be stressed. I can't trust the surroundings and environment because I can't ever feel settled, and your cells start to take on the consciousness. So as much as it's sometimes hard to hear that like, whoa, I'm really that responsible for my health, we are. And as much as, there are still things that can happen, like I said, hereditary or a car accident or things that are out of our control possibly, right? Like it's different if maybe I'm getting drunk and get in a car accident while I'm driving, right? But what I'm saying is the decisions of when it's really coming down to it, when it boils down to just me and where my control is over my health, these are some of those deep truths, okay? So I think that's why in the first podcast, I really brought up that book because that's the book that I usually hand people who have a disease to start studying and learning how they can adjust maybe their stress levels, their attitudes, and the effects of that on the cells. As people want to find wellness as well, they need to find still the people that can help them. That might include counseling. It could include body work, right? Because we've talked before in the podcast, like you can't have a lot of trauma and only do counseling and not get body work because you'll only get half of your healing. The other half has to be settled and coming out of the tissue to be healed because there's somatic memory, right? And the limbic system and other places in our body that remember trauma. And I can speak about this from experience. So I was taking craniosacral training, and they do like a hyoid bone release, which is a bone. It's a floater bone right here. It's extremely delicate, and it holds a lot of the front of the muscles right here in the soft tissue spot of where very important structures are, right, in place. Bones are articulations for ligaments and tendons and for stability of the structure of our body. And so and I don't need to go into it in a huge way, but I was already a trauma worker. And so I knew how to breathe through trauma. And I knew about like when the body releases trauma, but never in my whole field yet had I trained where we could manipulate this bone for healing and for health. And so as my partner goes to do it on me, all right, I was on the table, my eyes were closed, and I got this entire flashback, this entire trauma memory of this time where my dad grabbed me by the throat and picked me up and started choking me. And I started re-experiencing it again, as if it was happening. But I knew it was the memory of the tissue. I was familiar with this, right? And I was already doing yoga for a long time and healing meditation. So I knew as it was occurring, because I was in a training space with like probably 50 people, I started talking myself down. Just breathe through it, Teresa. Sit through the memory because it will lose its power and the body will heal and this tissue needs released. Because if it stays in there, I might not see disease for a decade or a couple decades, but I will see disease later from the lockup of such trauma in life, and it could be released and avoided. And so I breathed through it, and my partner was, asked me if I was okay, and I just had said, I didn't want to answer her. I wanted to work through the memory. I had no clue that when we were finished, she said to me, Teresa, are you sure that you're okay? I said, oh, I'm okay. I had a bad memory. I was breathing through it. My eyes were closed. And she said, because you're in a fetal position on the table. And I had no clue that my body had moved into that position because I was experiencing it so much stronger, right? And breathing through it. And so I said, wow, and it really revealed to me, it was another revelation of how it can come out of the body. So the next day when we go to practice, we had to practice the bone again, right? We're doing review in this class. And it was nowhere near as strong because I sat through it. I had a slight memory. It wasn't at all as traumatic because I had let it release. And I felt so much better. And now when people go there, like I was just training again in cranial sacral therapy, like about 2 weeks ago out of state. And we had also repracticed, right, some of these steps. It really doesn't have this massive effect over me anymore, right? So there are sometimes such traumas that they need to be released out of the tissue. But the other beautiful thing is somebody who does Reiki also has the ability to work on this stuff with Reiki, and not always do the people have to re-experience the memory. So sometimes it's important for the healing and other times it's not. So let me think also some of the other things that are important is to remember, as much as like I might have my kids or my spouse or my partner, and that's a relationship, people sometimes don't realize that your relationship with your body matters. So the ability to also stay healthy means, do I even like hear my body? Do I listen to my body when it's trying to communicate something is off? Do I even know how my body functions? Have I ever even studied or read up on anything about the body in which I actually live out my life? And to me, I think sometimes people think they're stuck with certain conditions or tension in the body or pain somewhere when they're really not. And they actually just need to go find the right practitioner, or they need to get up and actually go stretch more regularly, because stretching is really that important for the structure of our spine and for our body. Do people actually try to work on the neuromuscular connections to a muscular weakness that's causing an imbalance from the left or right side of the body? We have to be able to not just look at life as work and entertainment, right? We also have to take care of ourselves and take out the time to keep our body fine-tuned so that we can live our best life. When our body is in harmony, our attitudes are better, our outlook is better, we're more positive, right? So all those things really matter. So some of the things I want to talk about as far as also that can hold us back from getting healed is that we keep saying we want to do something. Oh, I really want to try yoga. I'm going to try it someday. I know that I need it. I'm my own worst enemy. I keep avoiding doing that. It's like, okay, you're not going to get any further, like you can't be set free without any effort. And as we age, I'll give you an example here. Our elastin starts getting a little bit different in our body. And so we get tighter with age. So it's natural for us to need to actually move the body to keep the full range of motion in our joints or in our spine, and also to stretch so that if I'm doing a lot of motions at work where I'm only working the muscles of the front body more, or I'm bending down a lot, or I'm sitting too much, which is going to really flex the psoas muscle and cause like low back issues later, that means I need to undo that when I get out of work. I need to go do yoga or stretch the psoas and do things to strengthen my other back muscles so that my muscles stay balanced, so that I'm not getting slip discs, so that I'm not only working one side of my body and there's no structural balance, okay? So this is where I say, like, it's up to you. Most people say they want to try these things, but they won't take out the time. And then when they finally do, It's life changing. You know, every time my yoga students step on their mat, you just watching them. The difference from when they step on their mat and they're so worn out from their week or they're stressed, and that hour that they give themselves, that by the time they're finished, they literally look so renewed and so much more even keel and at peace. It's like, don't you think that you're worth taking care of yourself? Because we really won't be good to anybody, and we won't be good at life, and we won't be good in our relationships if we don't, right? We'll be lacking, or they'll be lacking, or problems will occur. So if you want to understand more as well about how being in an abusive relationship, or how we can have issues sometimes with boundaries, remember, you can always go back to the boundary episode. But as well, just understand, if you're willing to accept mistreatment over and over and over again, you have to ask yourself why. You have to ask yourself if you just don't value yourself enough to think that you deserve a healthy relationship. Is this something that you learned when you were younger? Were one of your parents abusive, and so you just think this is the way life is supposed to be, which it's definitely not, right? And I can tell you from experience, people that are emotionally abusive or abusive physically, it doesn't get better. It gets worse over the years. I have experience due to growing up in a home, right, with a very abusive father. So, and I think too, depending on whatever religion you are, it's not okay to think that any karmic thing makes you stuck in a terrible abusive relationship. Otherwise, you'll be stuck with that person in another life. I've heard people say that before. That's really not logical and not good for you. God does not want you to be stuck in any kind of abuse. That is not the will of God. That is not why we are here. Okay? People that are abusing others are not well, and they need help. And it clearly can't come from the people that they're actually abusing and taking advantage of. So, other things I would say are just making sure that you have enough nutrients and minerals. That's another way that we stay healthy. And this includes making sure we have a good multivitamin. We're not talking about the ones you get at Walmart. We're talking, do some research, get some really good brands of vitamins, making sure that the company has real integrity. Making sure that you're eating healthy. This does include vegetables, right? Especially greens, making sure you're getting fruits. The body needs the different minerals and nutrients to also stay healthy. Iodine is one that's super important that some people have real deficiencies in. Also vitamin D in the state that I live in. And vitamin D acts like a hormone to the body. And it's proven that women that are very, very low in vitamin D, that this is like a precursor for breast cancer, right? So there are ways to prevent some of the things by making sure we're getting what we need. Okay. So the last thing that I just want to talk about are resources. Okay. So resources are good bodywork places. You're talking about people that have integrity, that have good credentials, also counselors that have good reviews and credentials, right? All of you did meet Margaret, right, through the podcast. So she is a resource. There's also, the place where I work, we have a huge team of us. There's anywhere from, I'm pretty sure the one girl, Rebecca, does laryngeal work and other things for swallowing issues. Then we have lymphatics, we have Reiki practitioners, cranial sacral therapy, myofascial release, visceral manipulation, which is organ manipulation, right? We have, let me think of anything else, zero balance. One of the new therapists does zero balance there, and I feel like I'm forgetting something, but that's okay. So that place, I'm hoping maybe eventually that I will actually have as a guest the owner, who's just a wonderful person. And so that place is in Hudson, Ohio. If you ever want to check out and need good therapeutic body work and also are seeking some healing. So again, that's Still Point Therapeutics. And you can look it up online. and it's in Hudson, Ohio. The other place that I can say are different yoga studios. You know, you might go to one yoga studio and you go in to take a class and you just don't care for that style, or you think that that class was too hard. There's many different classes. You're not stuck taking a power yoga class, right? You can take a yin. There's many, many different levels of classes within yoga studios. And you can also take a class and not think that all teachers deliver yoga exactly that way. So sometimes you have to like do your homework and go like have an adventurous couple different classes and different teachers to find which ones really speak to you. So another good resource would be Half Moon Yoga, and Half Moon Yoga is 2 studios. There's the Richfield location and the Medina one. And so these are just some really great ways to also learn meditation, to help balance the mind, to help learn how to balance and slow down your heart rate when it's starting to really increase if you're feeling anxiety or stressed. And so I really encourage you to look up wherever you live and find the resources that you need so that you can live your best life and stay healthy. So this is just this like first podcast back where we just wanted to talk about like disease and how it happens and just some important things that kind of surround that, including taking responsibility for ourselves and our ability to stay healthy through our attitudes and getting our needs met. And we're not talking about egotistical needs. We're talking about our needs met, making sure that we can also have the time for healing and restoration so we can live our best life. As always, speak life into yourself and others. And I hope you have a blessed and wonderful day. Take care.